Okay, each unit is having okay 3 units in it. Okay, each block have 3 units, so total is 12 units which is having. So this particular paper it talks about okay psychological assessment. Okay, so to give a brief introduction of the paper, okay, unit 1 talks about introduction to psychological assessment. It talks about like introduction. Okay, what particularly you mean by psychological assessment, psychological testing, okay, definition of psychometrics, and unit 2 talks about psychophysics, okay, a field which talks about okay our senses, okay, sensory stimuli. And unit 3 talks about psychological assessment methods. Okay, then block 2 talks about psychological testing. Okay, what you particularly mean by psychological test? So how these tests are constructed? So what is the definition of reliability, validity? Okay, how they are important. The next block 3 it talks about test standardization. As once the test is formed or constructed, so how these tests are standardized. Okay, so there is a procedure for this particular standardizations, how to establish norms, so how to interpret test scores, and also how you make use of the required or appropriate statistical techniques. And block 4 talks about types of test, like we have intelligence test, aptitude test, personality test. So this is brief about our okay, paper, okay, psychological assessment. To begin with psychological assessment, first you should be able to know what you particularly mean by okay, assessment. Okay, so before getting into that, you would try to know what psychology is. For example, the definition of psychology is okay, study of scientific study of human behavior. So, as the word is derived from a psyche and logos, which means study of soul. So this is how psychology has started as a study of soul, but over a period of time, it got emerged to the present definition of study of behavior. Okay, so as we are focused to study behavior, so this particular topic or the paper try to assess the personality or behavior of a person. Okay, so this is called as psychological assessment. So talking about what assessment is, what psychological testing is, and what are the differences between testing and okay, assessment. Okay, so we will try to know what particularly you mean by assessment. Okay, I try to share the screen so that you can also come to know about this. Okay, psychological assessment. So the term psychological assessment means okay gathering interpretation of psychological data for psychological evaluation through the use of tests, interviews, case studies, behavioral observation, and specifically designed apparatus and measurement procedures. Okay, so it is a gathering, okay, gathering of data regarding okay our behavior. So, and it is gathered through, okay, making use of tests, interviews, case studies, okay, and also specially designed apparatus and measurement procedures. So I repeat again, psychological assessment is defined as gathering and integrating of psychological data for psychological evaluation, okay, through the use of tests, interviews, case studies, behavioral observation, and specifically designed apparatus and measurement procedures. Okay, and also you should know what is the difference between psychological testing and psychological assessment. So psychological testing is defined as, okay, a procedure which is psychological testing is a procedure which is using a test or a set of items designed to measure characteristics of human beings in relation to the overt, that is observable, or covert, that is the internal one, feelings, attitude, behavior, etc. Okay, so it is a set of items or set of statements, especially designed to measure characteristics of human beings. Okay, it also covers both overt, that is the one which are observable outside, and also which cover or which also deals with the internal, that is covert. They call it as covert, 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 that is the feelings, attitude, etc. Okay. So what is the use of this particular psychological testing or psychological test? Okay, psychological tests are used to obtain information that is fast and comparable to a reference score. Okay, so this particular test of, okay, scores of test of measures about the individual can be used and can be compared with the other group. Okay, and also the scales aid interpretation of test scores. Okay, they help in interpretation of what a person is getting. Okay, the scores. Okay, the test scores are also called as raw scores. Okay, so the raw scores which a person is getting, so they can be tested and compared with the other people. So it is a theoretical and empirical distribution of measures of a person. Okay, so there is a difference between psychological testing and psychological, okay, assessment. Okay, and to make it more clear, the psychological assessment is a broader term, and psychological testing is a part of psychological assessment. Okay, so psychological testing is providing measures about a person. Okay, a set of procedures, a set of structured items or statements which are designed to gather information about one particular person's abilities or psychological constants. Okay, when we're talking about assessment, assessment is the overall. Okay, assessment is the overall evaluation of the person. Okay, which is also using psychological test as one of its part. Okay, so both involve identifying areas of our concern, that is what we are focused on, what we are trying to measure. So it is identifying area of concern, then based on the identification you're trying to collect, okay, information or data regarding that particular selected measure. Okay, then when you're talking about psychological test, okay, it is talking about administration test, and it is solely or focused only on collection of data regarding the measurements, that is the psychological constructs of a person. When you're talking about psychological assessment, it is more broader, it is wide, and also it involves not only psychological test, but also several other methods. Okay, and for making assessment, as it is using of both psychological test and other psychological methods. Okay, one should be very clear. It is a skilled and a trained person can make a more meaningful assessment than a unskilled person. Okay, so conducting a psychological test, okay, you need not, or a less skilled person can do that. But when you talk about assessment, a psychological assessment is a wide, broader term. So it has to be done, or a skilled or a professional can give better understanding of the constructs, because it's not only making use of the data or test scores, but also it is making use of another clinical methods or clinical tools like observation, etc., and also trying to integrate and trying to interpret the particular data through all these methods and trying to come to a conclusion. So this is the difference between psychological assessment and psychological test. Okay, so one should be clear about these particular topics, because so that they can tell or they can clarify and to avoid confusion. Psychological assessment, broader term. Psychological testing or psychological test is one of the assessment tools. Okay, so psychological assessment, overall observation, overall analysis. When you're talking about a test, it is designed or a set of items, statements, focused or designed to collect information or data regarding the selected psychological constructs. Okay, then we will talk about psychometrics. Okay. Psychometrics is a term which particularly talks about psychometrics. So, psychometrics is defined as a field that is concerned with the theory and techniques of psychological measurement. As we talked about psychological measurements, so psychometric is a field which is concerned or which is, okay, focused on theory as well as techniques of psychological measurements. It includes the measurement of knowledge, abilities, attitudes, personality, traits. Okay, it includes measurement of, okay, knowledge, abilities, attitudes, personality traits, and also the educational measurements of a person. Okay, psychometrics as two major research tasks. That is, it is concerned with the construction of instruments and procedures for measurement. Okay, construction of instruments or tools, psychological tools, and establishment of procedures for, okay, taking measurements. Okay, and also the second one, the development or refinement of theoretical approach to measurement. So it's talking about construction as well as the theoretical approaches or theoretical developments to measure or to measurement. The person who practice psychometrics are known as psychometricians. Okay, so all psychometricians possess, okay, certain qualifications. Okay, knowledge of, okay, psychology is required. Statistics is most important because it's all talking about, okay, construction as well as the procedures, okay, theory building as well as the analysis part of measurements. So knowledge of these particular topics or field knowledge is important. Okay, so statistics knowledge is also very important for psychometricians to not only gather but also to interpret meaningfully based on the data what they are getting. Okay, So then we have uh, the concepts of psychometrics, that is, so how this particular field which is talking about, okay, theory as well as the techniques, psychological measurements are made. Okay, under that we have got two theories. Okay, we've got two theories which particularly talks about so how these, okay, tests are measured or how to measure this measurements. Okay, so classical test theory, it's also called as true score model. Okay, so this particular psychometric theory, as we know, or as it is talking classical, it is a old theory. So there is a old theory as well as a modern, okay, item response theory. So this is classical in the sense older one. So this particular theory, it talks about a set of psychometric procedures used to test items. Okay, so test items, when you're talking about a item is a statement or a, okay, set of questions or a statement which is designed to elicit responses or to get information about the psychological constructs of our choice. So talking about the psychometric procedures used to test items and scales. Okay? So talking about reliability, difficulty, discrimination, etc. Okay. So this theory originates or got its origin from the idea that there will be errors in measurement. Okay. So this particular classical theory, they have or they say that every measurement will have error, and these errors can be, okay, random variable errors and conception of correlation and indexing the errors. So they have come up with a statement, okay, and given a formula x is equal to t plus e. So what we are observing. So observed scores, okay, observed scores. So observed scores is equal to true score plus error. Okay, x is the observed score is equal to true score plus error. Okay, observed score is a score which we are getting through a test. Okay, so when you're trying to conduct a test, so what the value you are observing, it is the observed value. So observed value, whatever value you are getting, is having the true score, the actual score plus error. Okay, and this particular theory, it says that there is an error, and this error can be contribution, or it is because of, yeah. So this error is because of, so this error is because of, or can be due to the subject, that is the person who is taking the test, okay, is emotional state, fatigue, stress at the time of taking test. So it can be because of the test, okay, like due to the statements or what we calling as items, the type of items, okay, how they are designed, that is the type of format, and characteristics of the applicators, okay, and environmental conditions. Okay, the person where is taking a test can also contribute to the changes in the true score. Okay, and when a person is taking up a test, so what type of instructions he is receiving? Okay, So characteristics of the person who is taking the test, as well as related to instructions, especially when instructions are not particularly given in a correct and simple form, when the instructions are confusing, when the test is taker is not clear about it, when a test taker is not clear about okay what he is supposed to do with the items, so that can also create confusion. So when you talk about instructions, when common and correct instructions are not given to all the okay test takers, so that can also contribute, or that can also be the source for errors. Okay, and to control this error, this particular theory talks about establishing reliability. So reliability stands for okay, repeated measures of a test. Okay, when instructions keep changing, so this can contribute to different scores which cannot be similar. Okay, for example, different instructions, and because of that different instructions, different people can take it in a different way, and because of that there can be change in the scores or the observable scores. Even a same person, when he's taking test once, and if he's taking test for the second time over a period of time, when instructions changes, or when there is no clarity about instructions, so this is how it can result in change of the scores. So this is the summary of the limitations of classical test theory. So classical test theory says that observed value or observed score is having an error. So there are errors in measurement. So true score plus error will give the observed score. So what a person is getting a score on a test, that is observed score, is having actual score plus error. That error they are calling as random error, and that random error can be because of subject. So what state of mind is he told, and the test itself, like the items, their formation, their structuring, etc. Okay, the characteristic of the applicator or the examining, the environmental conditions where the test is taken, as well as especially with instructions. When the instructions are not clear also, that can also contribute to errors. Okay, so this is about classical test theory. When you talking about other modern theory, which is called as item response theory, okay, it says that the probability that one person emits a specific response to an item. So what a person responds to a item will depend upon the skill level of the person, okay, in the construct or on the item characteristics. Okay, so what a person is giving a response will depend upon the item, and it is based on the skill development or the skill level of a person. So this particular model, it is talking about the response and the corresponding item. So based on different skill levels, different people will elicit, different people will give different responses to one particular or same item. Okay, so when a same item is given to different people, so different subjects or different persons who taking the test will give different responses based on their skill level, and the likelihood that they give for their future, or that we can predict also. So what likely or based on the items, so how the responses can be also be elicited. Okay, so this particular theory, as it uh, states or the title says, item response theory. So this particular theory, it says that each person based on their skill level, they try to give different responses and they try to respond differently. Okay, so this is more modern because it is not assuming that there is random error for all the subjects. It's not saying that the person's observed score is because of error, but is trying to, okay, give a more, okay, uh, detailed explanation recording the responses, and they're saying that each response would be different based on the subject skill level. Okay, so this is how each and every item, when they are designed in such a way that which requires certain level of skill, so this is how they elicit different responses from the test taker. Okay, so when you're talking about the test theory, so it is, okay, test theory, they have two: classical theory and, okay, classical test theory and item response theory. So item response theory is the modern one. It is based on items, types of items, so what they are designed for, and based on that, okay, it is requiring certain skill level, so that based on that skill level, the person is giving different responses. So this is more acceptable when compared to the classical test theory, because the classical test theory is saying that all the scores will have a random error. So that was the limitations of that particular theory. When you're talking about item response theory, so a, this requires long duration. It requires a person to be trained in such a way that they can make use of different mathematical models so that they can interpret the results, because it is a procedure which is making use of more of mathematical models for the prediction, because you're talking about skill level and likelihood in the future also. So there is such knowledge required for this particular theory. So this is the limitation of this particular item response theory. Okay, then we will talk about then we will talk about different methods of method psychological assessments. Different methods of psychological assessment. So under this we got, yeah, so under this we got different methods like observation method, first one; second one, personality interventions; third one, projective techniques. Okay, under projective techniques, okay, personality test, intelligence test, okay, achievement test, aptitude test, okay, attitude test, vocational test, and neuro psychological test. Okay, so to be studied in detail, yeah, so observation method, which includes, okay, selecting a particular pattern, okay, selecting a particular, yeah, so selecting a particular behavioral trait and making a observation, or to look for, so how frequently that particular behavioral pattern is elicited. Okay, it is talking about not the entire behavior, but it is talking about a particular selected trait of behavior or pattern of behavior, and trying to observe or record. Okay, observation is talking about recording, so how frequently this behavioral pattern is elicited. Okay, and Albert Bandura proposed this particular observation method. Okay, observation can be done by a skilled person, because observation is not a mere seeing or looking at events, but we are focused on the selected behavioral pattern. Okay, you're trying to identify, select one particular behavioral pattern, and you're recording. So we are recording on. So how frequently this particular behavioral pattern is elicited. So identifying a behavioral pattern or a set of behavior, then you trying to look at that, okay, record it and try to analyze. So observation method, then personality inventory. So personality is a set of behavior, cognitive and initial patterns, okay, which are specific, unique behavioral patterns, okay, of a person. So how they react to certain specific things. So they're unique patterns. Okay, so these particular personality inventories are used to collect data related to personality aspects. Okay, it consists of questionnaires. Okay, where a set of questions would be there, opinions, inventories, okay, rating scales, etc. to collect information regarding personality traits. Example is MMPI, which is called as multi, okay, Minnesota multi-phase personality inventory. Okay, then we have projective techniques. So these projective techniques are not direct, but they are indirect. Okay, they are trying to know what the internal, okay, okay, internal behavioral patterns, okay, okay, underlying motives. Okay, they try to measure underlying motives, urges, okay, and intentions. Okay, not through a direct method, but through an indirect method, through using, okay, not specific or not structured, okay, objects or pictures, so that the person will try to project their internal or underlying motives, conflicts, urges to that particular, okay, objects or pictures. The best example is Rorschach ink blocks. So in this particular test, there will be different ink blocks, different colors, different, okay, pictures which are not very structured. So based on the internal motives, the person try to project their underlying motives. Okay, so the projection, they try to project their underlying principles or underlying, okay, adjacent instincts. So projective techniques. Okay, based on the trait, psychological tests are divided into, okay, personality test. As we talked, they're talking about personality traits of a person. Then intelligence. So intelligence is defined as the ability of a person to think, okay, getting adjusted to a new situations. So this particular intelligence test, they try to assess the intellectual abilities of a person. Okay, the tests are designed to know or to identify the intellectual abilities. Okay, example, Stanford Binet IQ test. Okay, Wechsler's intelligence test. Okay, there is also Wechsler's intelligence test for children also, and okay, Raven's progressive matrix test is also one intelligence test. Okay, we have that particular test for children also. Then achievement test. Okay, so this particular test is designed to know to what extent an individual get motivated to achieve the set goals. So achievement, we're talking about achievement test. So achievement test assess the achievement of the learner. So how could or how well they could reach the established set of goals. Okay, like example spelling test, okay, timed arithmetic test, okay, math, physics, etc. So it is talking about achievement of a learner. So attitude test. So attitude is a set of emotions, beliefs, behavior towards a person, object, event, or a circumstances. Okay, so this particular attitude tests are specifically designed to know people's beliefs, so how they're feeling about a person or a object. Okay, examples Thurston scale and Likert scale. Okay, we will talk in detail about this particular two scales, Thurston scale and Likert scale, in the coming topics. Then aptitude test. Aptitude is the capacity of an individual to do certain kinds of works. Okay, for example, like clerical aptitude, teaching aptitude test we have. Okay, so finger dexterity test. So this particular aptitude test will decide upon so how good person can do or how good he will manage to do certain capacities required for specific things like teaching. So teaching skills. So how good he can teach will be decided by aptitude test. Okay, so before entering into a teacher's okay, teacher job, so they have this aptitude test to test so how good he will fit into that particular aptitude test. Then occasional test. So occasional tests are the tests which are trying to predict okay whether the person will fit into one particular job or not. Okay, what the job is expecting from the particular person and how good he can fit in this particular job. So it's trying to predict so how successful he will going to be in the particular job. So occasional test. So this test would be conducted at the time of okay, job openings or placements. So the people or the HR department that try to use this particular occasional test with the help of the psychometrician or a psychologist. Then neuropsychological test they're talking about okay relationship between the brain and the behavior. So how different parts are associated with the different behavioral patterns and how if one particular brain part is getting disturbed or damaged and what is its impact on the behavior of a person. So they're trying to know the relationship between brain function and its impact on the behavior of a person. Okay, and also they try to know the different psychological illnesses based on this particular okay neuropsychological test. Okay, then observation test. It is a test of observation, construction, and presence of mind. So you try to observation test to know okay how concentrated the person is and what is the presence of mind for that particular situation or particular moment. So this is about the unit one, and also there is importance of psychological tests. So how these psychological tests are important? They are uh, they are useful in identifying learning difficulties. As we know, when a person is not able to learn, it will leading to certain disabilities which are called as learning disabilities. So this particular psychological test try to identify, help us identify what are different identity. Okay, first identification, then to know the characteristics and how to treat this different learning disabled people or learning difficulties among the students. And also it helps administrators and teachers to evaluate the students' academic performance. So when they try to conduct the test, they can know the students' academic performance. Okay, to help ascertain the vocational abilities of the students. As we talked about vocational tests, so they help us in ascertaining the vocational skills or the abilities required and a student possesses. Okay, they are useful to know the strengths, weaknesses of the students. Then, okay, psychological tests are helpful to find out the delayed skill among the students. So, if there is any developmental delays and also related to particular skills that can be identified because of our psychological test. And especially we talked about placement. So, in placement, the psychological test will decide upon or they can help out. So how well a person will fit into a job and the progress of a employee in that particular job. So how successful a person can be in a particular job. So it is also useful to diagnose psychological disorders, personality disorders, depressive disorders, cognitive functions, okay, and also the emotional status of recruiters and hiring persons. Okay, so this is about unit one, a brief description about psychological assessment, psychological testing, and also we talked about psychometrics. Okay, psychometrics theory. Then we talked about okay, psychometrics theory. Then we talked about methods of psychological assessment, and also we talked about importance of psychological testing. Okay, so with this, I would like to end up this class and we'll start with unit 2 in the next hour. tomorrow's session. Okay.